On the 3rd of April 2008, during the Bucharest summit, Nicolas Sarkozy announced that France was likely to join NATO again and confirmed that he would send more troops into Afghanistan. This is a very important move because for a long time France has not been part of NATO and now make their announcement that they want to be part again. And President of France, Nicolas Sarkozy, is actually making this announcement. This is very important because in Daniel 11 verse 25 it says, "And he shall stir up his power and his courage against the king of the south with a great army. And the king of the south will wage war with an exceedingly great army, a great and mighty army, but he will not stand, for schemes shall be devised against the king of the south." We see that he will come with a great army. We've already seen how a cavalry of horses will rise. The NATO forces and all the European Union nations pull together against his enemies. Nicolas Sarkozy opposed the US-led invasion of Iraq. However, he was critical of the way that Jacques Chirac and his foreign minister expressed France's opposition to the war. Talking at the French-American Foundation in Washington, D.C. on the 12th of September 2006, he denounced what he called the French arrogance and said it is bad manners to embarrass one's allies or sound like one is taking delight in their troubles. He also added, "We must never again turn our disagreements into a crisis." This is a very hypocritical statement, because on the one end he says that they don't want to be part of the US-led invasion into Iraq. Very interesting that the news here specifically said that the US led the United Nations. But he also then comes and say that France or the French people are arrogant, but excluding himself. He said it's bad manners for one's allies to embarrass one's allies or to take delight in their troubles. We can see here how he swings between the opinions, trying to please everyone on every front. French journalists have called him a hyper-president to insist on his excessive power and his omniscience in all domains. Some media even compared him with Napoleon Bonaparte or Louis IV to refer to his will to control and change everything. We see here what Yeshua had shown us, that this man will be like Napoleon Bonaparte. And here in the news he is compared with Napoleon Bonaparte, not only in stature but also in attitude, trying to be excellent and have use of excessive power and his omniscience in all domains. And he has a strong will to control and to change everything around him. In Daniel 11:23, Daniel says that from the time that an alliance is made with him, he will work deceitfully, and he shall come up unexpectedly, and shall become strong with a small people. Without warning and stealthily, he will come into the most productive place of the province, among the richest men of the province, and shall do that which his fathers have not done, nor his fathers' fathers. He shall distribute among them plunder, spoil, and goods, and shall devise plans against strongholds, but only for a time, the period decreed by God. We see here how he, according to prophecy, will come up unexpectedly, and he will work with a few, as we have already seen. On the 24th of July 2007, the French and the European representatives obtained the extradition of the Bulgarian nurses detained in Libya to their country. In exchange, President Sarkozy signed with Gaddafi a security and a healthcare and immigration pacts at a value of 230 million or 186 million euros, and also sold them Milan anti-tank missiles. President Sarkozy pledged to sell Libya 3 civil nuclear power stations as part of a package of trade and assistance that will boost the role of French companies in the oil-rich country. We see here, just as the prophecy had said, that he will devise plans against the king of the south, which is Egypt, but also Libya. And how in the one end, he says he will work with Libya and he will build them power stations and supply them with weapons even. But we have already seen what has happened in the news, how he has turned upon them and released the weapons of war against his own people. It says he will work behind the scenes, but he will not stand, for schemes shall be devised against the king of the south. So there are schemes working right now behind the scenes against President Gaddafi as well as the former president of Egypt, in order to bring about the plans of the Illuminati, which will finally and soon be led by the new leader, the Antichrist. Sarkozy stated that the roots of France are essentially Christian at a speech in Rome in December 2007. And he also called Islam one of the greatest and most beautiful civilizations the world has ever known, at a speech in Raida in January 2008. And both these comments, of course, drew criticism. Here we see that the president are standing on both sides of the line. On the one side, he says that France is essentially Christian, working with Rome and with the Roman Catholic Church. But then again, when he is in the Islam world, he changes colors again. And he says that Islam is one of the greatest and the most beautiful civilizations the world has ever known. We can clearly see that he is not to be trusted. He changes just as the weather changes. In Daniel 11:37 verse 37, it says, "And the king shall do according to his will. He shall exalt himself and magnify himself above every god, and shall speak astonishing things against the God of gods, and shall prosper till the indignation be accomplished. For that which is determined by God shall be done. He shall not regard the gods of his fathers, or him to whom women desire to give birth, the Messiah, or any other god, for he shall magnify himself above all. But in their place he shall honor the God of fortresses, a God whom his fathers knew not, shall he honor with gold and silver, with much precious stones, and with pleasant and expensive things. And he shall deal with the strongest fortresses by the help of a foreign god. And those who acknowledge him he shall magnify with glory and honor, and he shall cause them to rule over many, and shall divide the land for a price." Yahweh had revealed to his servant Daniel that this man would please all men on every side, but finally he would rise up to exalt and magnify himself. He will speak astonishing things or blasphemous things against the God of heaven and earth. We see here, on the one side he says he's Christian, and then suddenly he says that he agrees with the Muslim faith. We can see that he actually serves no God but himself. But we see here that he will serve a God which is called the God of fortresses. This God of fortresses is a God of war. It says that all that acknowledge him, he shall give them honor, and he shall magnify himself, and he will even give them the power to rule with him. And he will finally divide the land for a price. President Sarkozy was present at the 3-day G20 summit led in 2008 and 2009 in Washington, London, and in Pittsburgh. And he made various propositions. Before the London summit, he threatened not to attend it if other leaders did not promise to take decisive measures. He wanted all leaders to be committed to refund the capitalism upon new basis and to introduce more morals in finance. Here we see that he is very adamant and very cocky, just as Yeshua had described him. He refused or threatened to not go to a summit in London if the leaders would not make decisive measures. During the 2008 South Ossetia War, which was the Georgia War, Nicolas Sarkozy played a significant role. We see how he actually became an intermediate between Russia and Georgia, bringing and calming Russia so that they would not attack and destroy Georgia. Georgia being the very country that stands in the way of the nations of the East being able to come out of the north against Israel. And again, he's portrayed as a peacemaker in the news, and one that actually brings peace. But behind the scenes, he is a ferocious wolf. Sarkozy is considered a goyalist and a populist. That is what the news media has actually labeled him as. What is a populist and what is populism? Populism, defined both as an ideology and a political philosophy, is a type of political social thought urging social and political system changes and or rhetorical style deployed by a member of political or social movements. It is defined by the Cambridge Dictionary as political ideas and activities that are intended to represent ordinary people's needs and wishes. We see here that the main aim of a populist is to please the people. He has a certain political philosophy, a certain way of thinking, and his way of thinking is, as we'll see now, is to win the masses. The 21st century definition of populism defined populism as an ideology which pits a virtuous and a homogeneous people against a set of elites and a dangerous others who are together depicted as depriving or attempting to deprive the sovereign people of their rights, their values, their prosperity, identity, and voice. We see here how he will appeal to the needs of the masses and of the people, turning them against the elites or those whom they considered as the dangerous others, who will be presented as wanting to deprive them of their basic needs and values. In fact, given its central tenet that democracy should reflect the pure and the undiluted will of the people, populism can sit easily with ideologies of both the right and the left. Indeed, while leaders of populist movements in recent decades have claimed to be on both the left and the right of the political spectrum, many populists claim to be neither left-wing, nor center, nor right-wing. We see that those who follow the ideology of populism, or are considered a populist, you can never actually place them. You can never find out, are they on the left side or on the right side? Or are they in the middle? They claim that they are not one of the three. And this is a kind of democracy that the mindset of the President of France. Populism rose during the Reformation. Protestant groups like the Anabaptists formed ideas about ideal theocratic societies in which peasants would be able to read the Bible for themselves. Attempts of establishing these societies were made during the Peasant War from 1524 to 1525 and the Münster Rebellion in 1534 to 35. However, the peasant movement ultimately failed as cities and nobles made their own peace with the princely armies, which restored the old order under the nominal overlordship of the Holy Roman Emperor, which was at that time Charles V, represented in German affairs by his young brother Ferdinand. We see here how in the early days there was a reformation, in their eyes a rebellion against the system. Those who believed in God wanted to set up a theocratic society. That was one that is led by God. But they wanted to set up a democratic society. And we see here how in the end people, more than those who followed God, decided to make peace with the so-called princely armies. Those who were leading, and those kings and those who had the power at that time, not wanting to be killed, trying to prevent persecution against them. And they were restored under the old order of the Holy Roman Emperor once again. Here we see that the Roman Catholic Church is still in control, and we still have the Holy Roman Empire ruling in that time under Charles V, who represented Germany at that time, which we see that Germany has actually had a period where there was different times when the Kingdom of Germany, or the Holy Roman Empire of Germany, started to rise up. Here being the First Reich. Chateaubriand brought about two Catholic revivals in France. First, a conservative revival led by Joseph de Maistre, which defended ultramontanism, also known as the supremacy of the Pope in the Church. And the second was a populist revival led by Félicité de l'Armenès, an excommunicated priest. We see that two things were revived in those times under the Holy Roman Empire. That they revived, first of all, that the Pope has the supremacy in the Church. And this was the so-called Catholic revival that happened in France. And the second thing that happened was they revived what they call a populist revival. Therefore, whatever the people wanted, they started to tend towards that. In the 18th century, the French Revolution, though led by wealthy intellectuals, could also be described as a manifestation of populist sentiment against the elitist and excesses and privileges of the ancient regime. We see here, strikingly, how the French Revolution, led by Napoleon Bonaparte at that time, took on the form of the mindset of a populist. So although at that time it says that there were wealthy intellectuals who were leading, yet a philosophy rose up, an ideology where there was a rebellion against those who were the elitist and who were actually trying to take away the privileges of the people. And this is what was used at that time to overthrow all the governments so that Napoleon Bonaparte could rise up to his power as emperor. It is believed by some that populist movements can be precursors for or a building block for a fascist movements. National Socialist populism interact with and facilitate fascism in the interim war for Germany. We see here how this mindset of populism has brought about and a preparation being a building block to bring the people to the interim German war. This paternalistic vision of aristocracy concerned with social orders has a dark side in that the opposite force of the modernity was represented by the Jews in that time, who were said to be eating away at the state. We see how the mindset of populism had portrayed the Jews as those who were the elitist or the dangerous others who were eating away at the German state, and making the people believe that they were losing their values and they were being stolen from them. Populism also played a role in mobilizing middle-class support for the Nazi party in Weimar Germany. In this case, distressed middle-class populists during the pre-Nazi Weimar period mobilized their anger at government and big businesses. We see how this tool of populism was used and can still be used to prepare the world so that those middle-class people would vent their anger against the government and the big businesses, bringing the country down to its knees. The Nazis parrotized the form and the themes of the populist and moved their constituencies far to the right through ideological appeals, which involved scapegoating and conspiracism. So what they also do is they will blame certain people, giving them the blame, saying that it was their fault that those things happened. And this caused the people to become angry, and then after they had become angry, they move from a position of neutrality to far right suddenly. Populism has also played an important role in Latin American political history. In Latin America, many charismatic leaders have emerged since the 20th century. Populism has recently been reappearing on the left with promises of far-reaching socialist changes as can be seen in Venezuela under their president, Hugo Chavez. Populist practitioners in Latin America usually adapt politically to the prevailing mood of the nation, moving within the ideological spectrum from left to right many times during their political lives. We see that a populist will move with the mood of the nation or the people, and he might move throughout his time period of rulership from left to right and back to the left as many times as you desire in order to please the people. One other concept that's very important, because President Sarkozy has been labeled as a new populist. New populism is distinguished from the classical populism in shifting its focus from community rights to those of the individual. So they no longer play on what the community need, but what a specific individual need. Therefore, gaining more and more people to stand with them because of so-called personal rights that are taken away. Not mentioned here is just the whole fact of humanism and human rights that came in also in the French Revolution, which stemmed directly from this mindset of populism. Today we have a people who can vote, calling it democracy. But actually, what we really have is each person has his rights. And human rights has been created in the French Revolution so that the people could be pleased rather than doing the will of God. If you want to look at some examples of French populism today, we can just look at what the French president has been doing in his last few years in term. Before he was elected president of France, Sarkozy was the president of UMP, which is the French Conservative Party, and it was elected with an 85% vote. UMP, we've seen, is the United Party, or the Union Party, uniting all those people who want a certain thing together. Throughout 2005, Sarkozy called for radical changes in France's economic and social policies. Despite his opposition to same-sex marriage, he advocated civil unions and the possibility of same-sex partners to inherit under the same regime as married couples. Here we see he speaks out of two mouths. On the one side, he has an opposition to same-sex marriages, and speaking in the next moment, he's advocating civil unions. So which one is he actually saying? There's a saying that say, by not making a decision, you are making a decision. Sarkozy avoided taking a position on the ISF, or the solidarity tax on wealth. This is considered an ideological symbol by many on the left and the right. Some in the business world and on the liberal right wanted it abolished. For Sarkozy, that would have risked being categorized by the left as a gift to the richest classes of society at a time of economic difficulties. We see that even though the whole plan of solidarity tax on wealth would sit well with the left and the right, he would not choose or say, this is what I choose. He would rather sit in the center or not at all, as we have seen a populist do. Because if he does, the left would not be pleased by his decision. And it will give a gift to the richest classes of society. During his campaign, rival candidates had accused Sarkozy of being a candidate for brutality. and of presenting hardline views about France's future. Opponents also accuse him of courting conservative voters in policy making in a bid to capitalize on right-wing sentiments among some communities. Here we see that he is actually recognized by those in the higher classes as a candidate for brutality. Why? Why would they make such a statement? What is there that they have seen that we know nothing about, but will soon see? We see here that he was accused of capitalizing on right-wing sentiments in order to court conservative voters, thus winning more and more people to his side so that he could stay in position and be re-elected as president. All these things we have seen so far just paints a picture of a person and a character, and also the way that things have happened in the past in order to bring about what will now come to pass. Just as Yeshua had said, Yeshua had shown us the sign of the swastika on the one side, and we saw on the other side the Rosicrucian cross. And we know that the Roman Catholic Church was sitting behind Hitler. Hitler was put in place by the Roman Catholic Church. He was chosen and prepared for that very purpose. We'll now see how this very same thing will happen, as the President of France will again be endorsed by the Pope to the whole world as a man of peace, who neither choose Christianity nor Islam, who is not a fighter but a peacemaker. And being presented in this way, most of the world will be deceived to believe that he is a peacemaker, capitalizing on their needs. But as soon as he is in position, he will become the candidate for brutality because of his hardline views about how he wants things to be done. And as we have seen, they called him a hyper-president who always want to be in control and want to bring change. He would walk out of a meeting or threat to walk out of a meeting just to get his will done. As we've already seen, that Yeshua had shown us a sign of a man standing on a nuclear submarine having the head of a boar. Now this is a very interesting symbol that Yeshua had used to indicate the head or the leader of this whole beast system that will arise in the last days. The boar was a symbol and a sign that was used for the country of France in the past. But the boar is also, the head of a boar is also a very significant sign that also was in the French Revolution. According to history, it says that while Napoleon is best known as a master strategist and charismatic presence on the battlefield, he was also a tactical innovator. He combined classical formations and tactics which had been used for thousands of years with more recent ones such as Frederick the Great's oblique order and the mob tactics of the early levée en masse armies of the revolution. Napoleonic tactics and formations were highly fluid and flexible. We see that there were certain tactics that was used in Napoleon's wars and how he was a great strategist as well as had a charismatic presence about him that made the people want to follow him. But he was also an innovator, thinking out ways to be able to attack. And in attacking, there's always formations that was used in order to attack the enemy. And the more fluid and flexible army was, the better it was of outwitting its enemy. One of those formations that Napoleon had developed was called the boar's head. It was a hybrid formation, somewhat like that of the mixed order that combined all three arms into a wedge-like square, which could be used for assault or defense. Infantry would form a short but thick line with many ranks deep on the front, which would be the boar's snout. Behind them would be two groups of artillery batteries, or the eyes of the boar. And on their flanks and behind them, in oblique order, would be another infantry in a column or a line or a square to form the boar's face. Protecting their flanks and rear would be two groups of cavalry, which would serve as the boar's tusks. And this was a highly complex formation which could not be formed easily or quickly as the others. Once formed, except for the tusk, it had slow mobility. It was however faster moving than the traditional square and less vulnerable to artillery or infantry fire. The tusks also gave it stronger offensive capabilities. It would later be employed to greater effect during the French conquest in North Africa during the 1930s and the 1830s and the 1840s, and would be used up until the 1920s in war. Yeshua not only shows us who the nation is that will lead this war, being France, but maybe even the very formation and the mindset and the strategy that will be used to be able to outwit and outflank the world's armies through this army that will be led by France.